Chapter 1165. We have officially reached the main event of the God Valley incident, the showpiece that acted as the foundation for the majority of this event's build-up. The fight between back then known as Rocks but now Davy D. Xebec against Gold D. Roger and Monkey D. Garp, which is the only acceptable follow-up that can keep up the momentum after the combo attack a couple chapters ago. But in other One Piece news, the SBS for Volume 113 is out. A casual discussion as usual, one very weird question as usual, but also a few very interesting ones. First, regarding human desires with Vegapunk splitting his consciousness. Maybe we'll delve more into that the next time we see York. But the other one is that we now have official calendar dates for the two One Piece calendars, the Age of Heaven and the Age of the Sea Circle, which is huge for piecing together the timeline. Plus, Queen is confirmed to be Frankie's deadbeat father. Next, finally, we've known about the Season 3 production beginning very soon. For the live action, we have some casting announcements. First, Mr. 2 Bon Clay, who will be played by Cole Escola, and the big one, which is Ace, who, as speculated, will be played by Jolo Maridueña from Cobra Kai, and this is a very easy win for the casting because in terms of appearance, he does fit the bill as Ace. I mean, looking at this picture with the hat and the flower like his mother, Podcast D Rouge, I don't even know if this is an official image, I don't know where it's from, but he looks like Ace. And finally, the voice actor for Shamrock has also been revealed in a promotional video which was also released for Volume 113, and it is Kenjiro Suda, and even if you don't know the name, you 100% know the voice. One of the most recognizable voices out there. I'd say best known nowadays as Nanami in JJK, but he's done so much more than that. So with the two brothers, Shanks and Shamrock, having different voice actors, would this confirm that Shanks was the one who met with the elders at the reverie, or was it just a situation where the anime staff simply couldn't have known about Shamrock being introduced later down the line? Even if they are given peeks about what's to come, the chapter where Shanks or Shamrock met the elders was released over 6 years before Shamrock was properly introduced this year. So it's something to think about. But back to this chapter, we have hit the climax of the entire incident. The cover art request is Beppo and Law sleeping on Zeus, using him as a pillow with a giant sheep as the mattress. Nice. Moving on. The chapter opens with Garp asking Roger if he can also hear Xebec's voice, so if it wasn't clear enough already, this is the voice of all things. I don't think there's anything else that it could be. And the thing with the voice of all things is that we don't even have any hints towards what it really is like we do with some of the other big mysteries. It's some telepathic form of communication that extends to inanimate objects and animals as well, because the poneglyphs seem to have the voice of all things, based on Roger's word at least. So how does that work? Did they need to be imbued with the voice of all things when they were made or something? It was the Kozuki clan who crafted them, and we know the two latest heads of that family, Momo and Oden, had and have the voice of all things, and that's all we know. It's an immensely rare ability. Does it have an origin? Did someone introduce it to the world, or has it always just been a thing since ancient times? Would the communication between Emu and the elders count as the voice of all things, or is that a separate ability? I've always viewed it as a separate ability, something else entirely. One of Emu's abilities, like the regeneration and the teleportation. So if we exclude Emu and the elders, every user of the voice of all things has been someone on our side, Joyboy's side, like Joyboy's companions, members of the D clan, and descendants of people who were Joyboy's allies, such as the Kozuki clan. The only outlier there is the three-eyed tribe like Pudding, who can awaken the ability with their third eye, and that's all we know about that race, other than the fact that they are also extremely rare with no pure-blooded members known. Line them up next to the Lunarians and the Buccaneers as races the world government hunted due to their abilities and former allegiances. Maybe they are the key to the voice of all things. Maybe Pudding is really that important. Anyway, the two of Roger and Garp are now fighting against Stormy Reversied Xebec, and throughout all of this, Xebec is crying, so he is still in there, even though he's not talking to Garp and Roger anymore. It's possible he can see what's going on now, but if we assume that he was only able to fight back a bit when Roger and Garp called him out, which would be after he went for Eris and Teach and Kuma sent him away, he might be thinking right now that he had killed his wife and child. Roger and Xebec clash swords and their conqueror's haki clashes while Garp jumps straight up to him and clocks him with a punch square in the face. If it wasn't for the dummy reversi, his nose would have shattered like Usopp's in Alabasta, but their attacks aren't doing any damage as Xebec swings his sword to repel them, and this first phase of the main event, the first round, ends with a huge clash of conqueror's haki once again. Imagine if anyone got left behind on the island before they were hit with a wave of conquerors after the combo attack, only to wake up and get hit with another wave. Although realistically, if they were knocked out by the combo attack, most of them would not have woken back up in the first place to get knocked out again. But Roger and Garp are forced back, crashing into the mountain, the one remaining peak which is for sure on its last legs as well, and the skies overhead have split open and it looks extra cool since it's right above the mountain. I assume that his haki is also being boosted by the dummy reversi as well as his physical strength, but at the same time he would definitely still be stronger than either of the other two, especially since they aren't in their primes here. But compared to when they are in their primes, there is a conversation to be had. Then we see Silverax telling some men to take the ship and leave, with Shrieky declaring, even though he doesn't have the power to declare anything within his crew, he declares nonetheless because it is already a foregone conclusion. This is the end of the Rocks pirates. You can really tell this incident is finally winding to a close. By the way, everyone is now leaving the island. There's nothing left for anyone here anymore. Not the residents, not the celestial dragons, not the marines, not the pirates. All that is left is for everyone to leave with their lives intact. Honestly, for the average pirate who came for Shaki from Hachinosu, they can chalk this up as just a bad day. A very bad day, but they can move on because they don't really, the average pirate's not gonna have the best of morals. Meanwhile, the average marine will be quaking in their boots because, well, they don't know that if they mention anything about this that their existence will literally be purged. I'm sure they're still smart enough to kind of understand that. Nevertheless, zip your mouth shut, lock it, and throw away the key. This day is not to be spoken about again. Back to Roger and Garp. They both receive calls on their transponder snails from their respective crews, and they reassure their men that they will be back. So while everyone else sails away, all that's gonna be left is the Oro Jackson and Garp's battleship, which I don't think has a name, but those two vessels will be waiting for their captain and commanding officer to return. Plus, they are all at least somewhat aware of what they are going to fight, whether it's Xebec or Emu. We know some marines saw them directly, maybe some of the Roger pirates as well. In any case, whether they think it's Xebec or Emu, this foreign entity taking over one of the five elders, they know that those two are heading into a war. So in a sense, this could be seen as a sort of test of loyalty and trust. I mean, we both know Roger and Garp survive, but in this moment right here, right now, how long would you wait for them to show up as you see the island falling apart and in your mind aware that they're fighting some sort of monster, a monster so terrifying that they literally cleared off the island through indiscriminate killing or just scaring everybody away? I don't think this really matters. I don't think Oda thought about this when putting together the scene, but it's just interesting to think about what would be going through these guys' minds as they wait and watch the island collapse in front of them. They're very roughed up now, and the resemblance with Ace and Luffy respectively is uncanny. They are definitely family, but it's time to get serious. They get up, they take off their jackets. Not that they weren't serious before, maybe it's better to say now it's time to give everything they have. They both came here with their own goals in mind, Roger for Shaki and the treasure, Garp for Roger and Xebec. So while Roger was the main reason he decided to take action once he did move, the objective was to take both of them. But fate had other ideas, and I've chosen the word fate on purpose because it's Xebec's current state which forced them to work together, and it was also Xebec who did put a lot of emphasis on the idea of fate. Xebec moves first by thrusting towards Garp, who jumps over it. Roger comes in from behind with a crescent moon-shaped slash since he wheeled his arms all the way back, and it hits Xebec into the mountain now, and Garp, who jumped over Xebec's first thrust, is now behind him and grabs his foot to hurl him away as Roger launches a downward swing. Fight choreography. This is a fight. I've never had an issue with the lack of fights or the abundance of clashes, haki clashes. mustaches, but seeing this is so fun. The Roger pirates reached the Oro Jackson, Shaki is safe, the treasure is secured, and Shanks is awaiting his awakening, still asleep in that chest. On a side note, there's the whole thing about whether Roger had the mustache here, because we saw he did in film Red, and that one scene of him and his crew finding Shanks is canon, but he doesn't have his mustache here. So it's a minor mistake, easily rectified, really doesn't even need rectifying. Roger can find Shanks without his mustache and we can just move on because who cares. But I would not mind a scene between now and then where Roger pulls a Dennis from the SpongeBob movie and just forces himself to grow one on the spot. Just make a joke out of it, you know. And Gloriosa is tagging along with them. I theorized before that since we hadn't seen her for a while after Shaki was saved, and with her feelings for Roger, she had nothing else to do on the island but follow the Roger pirates for those two, Shaki and Roger, and that's what she's doing now. Meanwhile, we see Kaido and Big Mom talking, kind of a one-sided talk. She is still going on about that fruit, and of course she says Kaido owes her a lifetime debt. Yep, I am all in on the idea that she has gaslit herself into believing she was in the right, and Kaido just went along with it because it's clear that he had no intention of repaying this falsified debt anyway. We made it all the way to Wano 38 years into the future and the debt was still an issue between them, and we know they hadn't spoken in years, and I don't think Kaido was ever the kind of guy who would have called Big Mom out of the blue to talk about it. And on top of that, like how I said she gaslit herself, the only reason she brought up the debt again in Wano was because she was trying to gaslight Kaido after he tried to check her for trying to get information on his road poneglyph. So it's barely even a debt, it's more like a shield, I think, for Big Mom's insecurities. Something childish that goes along with the concept of her being a child with limitless strength who never really grew up. Because guess what, even then the debt was pushed back because of their alliance to go after the One Piece, so no one really ever cared about it. Big sister holding something over the little brother, that's all. But Kaido also says that he will establish a crew where violence is everything, so this is where most people fell off the Kaido train, because that was the main takeaway from his very brief backstory. That was the face of it. Kaido wanted a world of violence, chaos, and how that's simple, but just because a character's main motivation or one of their main character traits is something like that, like violence, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because from my point of view, Kaido is my favorite villain in the story. Very unpopular opinion, I am aware of that. He was born in a war-torn nation, so he gained power to survive. Then he became a bargaining chip for others' political power. His source of food was through violence, being captured by the Navy. The Rocks pirates were all about individual strength. He was experimented on after this because of his strength and powers, so of course he would develop the worldview that he did, and that's purely talking about the power side of his character. We all know there's more to it. I know saying all of this is kind of a lost cause since he's most likely 99% not coming back, but I've said it once before in this flashback, you can never make me hate Kaido. Anyway, with Stroyson urging Big Mom to move, they part ways here on God Valley as we see Xebec hitting Roger down. And now that I do think about it, I'm not sure that they ever do meet up again until Wano. Elsewhere, we get the longest setup for a joke that has ever been in the history of recorded history, because we cut to Newgate, who meets a man who looks a lot like Marco, the same guy we saw a few chapters ago kicking back Silver Axe, and his name, which also all but confirms that he is Marco's father, his name is Polo Graham. So there's the whole thing about Japanese family names coming before the given name, meaning here Polo is the family name. So Marco's full name written in the Japanese order is Polo Marco, but in the more common order of given name first, it is Marco Polo. Marco was introduced in chapter 434, and maybe this wasn't planned, but 731 chapters later we have received the payoff for this joke, Marco Polo, and I think that is hilarious. Marco is alive as well right now, he's 7 at this time, and his father is the captain of the Polo Pirates here, which is another crew who came from Hachinosu, I guess. That would mean he was born and raised on Pirate Island potentially. He was an apprentice during the Oden flashback, so I wonder if his dad brought him along, or if his dad was also a deadbeat who left his son behind behind and Marco just followed in his footsteps later on. Because this man, Polo Graham, is a fan of Newgate and wants to join forces with him. So is this the birth of the Whitebeard pirates? Also, it's no wonder Marco became the 1st Division commander, because he is the son of the man who seems to have been Whitebeard's, no longer just Newgate, but Whitebeard's first official crewmate on the Whitebeard pirates. I've tried my best to call him Newgate for the entirety of this flashback since he wasn't Whitebeard just yet, but that's gonna change very soon. What if it was Marco's dad who came up with that name, by the way, instead of Newgate coming up with it himself? It sounds plausible to me. I can imagine a scene where he was struggling to come up with a name for his crew when Graham here suggested the name Whitebeard and the Whitebeard pirates. So this would also make Marco a 2nd generation member of the Whitebeard pirates after his father. So do we have any other 2nd generation pirates who were actively pirates? Because I'm not gonna count Momo and Oden since Momo was a baby. But as for what Newgate was doing before Polo Graham arrived, he was just standing there, and although we can't see at all, I'm assuming he ended up on the other side of the collapsed mountain, so he couldn't get involved in the fight, and he had enough sense not to shatter it because of the damage the debris would do to the others, the civilians still on the island or something like that. We see Stussy looking for Newgate. This is where her infatuation with him becomes an obsession. Gaunsby is back up, and Gil Basta, who is surprisingly not dead. The two of them are both running away with treasure, likely from the big haul that John pulled together, and Gil Basta is accompanied by a ghost similar to Perona's, so there's one more link between Thriller Bark and God Valley with this devil fruit as well. And next we hop over to a navy ship where Dragon is now threatening one of his commanding officers with a rifle, trying to force him to bring the surviving civilians onto the ship with them. Monkey D. Dragon, we aren't getting it here, but when we do get his flashback, the interaction with Garp, his father, is gonna be incredible. The Revolutionary Army here with Kuma, Ivankov, Ginny and Dragon were helping the people before they even became a thing. That's true heroism. Look at him at the start of this incident and now, two entirely different people. Rayleigh and Gabon head back for Roger, so I wonder what they'll see, because the end of the chapter seems very conclusive. So maybe it is like I was saying before about loyalty. They might not see anything important, but them going back just demonstrates the bond between them and their captain. Now all we need is a similar showing from Bogard on the Marine side for Garp. Or maybe the Holy Knights are still around on cleanup duty to take out the survivor of this fight, survivors. And this is where Summers develops his Gabon trauma, because him and Rayleigh show up before the Knights can do anything. And as I was saying before about the island falling apart, Emu, who is now in Saturn's regular human form and has left the island on a world government ship, has spoken. This island never existed. Now that they are in Saturn's form, his human form I should say, I may be clutching at straws, but I still would like to think that combo attack did something, even if the effect was minuscule. Something like them needing to regenerate in someone else's body required a lot of stamina, so from everyone else's point of view they just regenerated, so they still looked invincible, but internally that took a lot out of them. And we get an explanation on how all the information regarding the island was erased by CP6 and a Marine Navy base G11. I feel like that implies they also tried to silence a lot of people, as in end them, but they couldn't get to everybody because the Navy is still a huge part of their power and maintaining control around the world, so if they suddenly go around killing Marines, then surely that organization would just collapse from within. I'm assuming, I don't know. But back to Emu's orders, they didn't have an ancient weapon at this point, or at least the power source strong enough to fuel one, such as the Mother Flame, which is canonically purple, great choice of color, lilac, violet, some form of purple, purpley pink, and it may have a deeper meaning if we look at the visible light spectrum, with ultraviolet light having the shortest wavelength and highest frequency. Or another connection I've seen being made is to do with Judge's original name, Saint-Germain, and the real man who was associated with Violet Flame. But back to my original point, Emu does not have the power of an ancient weapon here, but the collective power of Roger, Garp, and a boosted Xebec are a pretty good substitute, because the battle rages on the other mountain peak, as I thought, is also destroyed, but those two, Roger and Garp, still can't do anything with Xebec's own Conqueror's Haki countering theirs. And for this next bit, I just feel like what is being said is almost a direct message to the reader, as if we are getting something spelled out for us, because Roger pokes Garp about how that thing which I'm assuming Roger still thinks was an elder was Saturn is connected to the government, and how that should go against the system's core ideals, an affront to justice, which Garp agrees with because of course he does. It's Garp, and Roger even has the gall to ask Garp to join his crew, which he obviously doesn't. Even if we didn't know about their future, it would be clear still that Garp's too headstrong to become someone else's subordinate, something Roger himself would feel when Shiki wanted him to become his subordinate, although while Shiki's was a legitimate offer, I'm sure Roger's offer here was not. But it does show they were as much each other's friend as they were rivals, even this long ago. But Garp's reason, his reason for sticking around, is for the Marines, but there's more to it because in Japanese the Marines can be referred to in two different ways. Kaigun, which refers to the organization as a whole, and Kaihei, which refers to the individual men who make up the ranks, and Garp uses Kaihei. He is sticking around for the average Marine, the fodder, the people no one care about, the foot soldiers who shouldn't have a place in this chaos but are here anyway. Garp's still there so he can protect them, because if he goes, who else will? And we know how this evolves when he meets Kuzan and eventually Kobe, that he's still there so he can protect the future as well. It's just, agenda is one thing, but if you genuinely questioned Garp's intentions, that's a red flag. This place has also become a wasteland now, and the two of them are discussing what to do, and simply Garp says that they just need their own conquerors to overwhelm Xebec, so he can't cancel it out. Haki lessons with Garp. He was a teacher all the way back then as well, which isn't to say Garp's explaining this to Roger, because Roger actually brought it up first, this topic, when he mentioned mass. So I like seeing how they both know what they need to do, but they're kind of bouncing off of each other as they talk. So in response to this, Roger and Garp channel all of their own conquerors Haki into one combined attack against him, knowing full well if they fail, they die. It's Roger who suggests they do this, and Garp has some final words for Xebec. He does not fully understand what's happened, but he can feel his frustration, and it's this shot specifically, the way Xebec's face is drawn truly makes me feel for him. The combination of the quivering lips, the snot, and what goes underappreciated in how Oda draws characters crying is how detailed their wrinkled brows and foreheads are. That really sells it. We've said it before, One Piece has some of the best depictions of crying, and it's also clear Roger can feel Xebec's pain as well, but he's just too overwhelmed to express that, and the chapter ends with their attacks being launched. But first, I may be overthinking this, but this panel in the corner, Xebec's roar or outburst is translated as Vo, and we know his laugh is Vo ha ha. So from my perspective, this is Xebec trying to laugh as if to show that he's happy he'll finally be free, no longer someone else's weapon. He's been given this tiniest bit of joy amidst all of this despair, and the attacks land as they carve and bludgeon his body. Roger's attack means the ace of the god of fire, or the god of fire's ace. Either way, I'm interpreting this to mean ace as in ace in the hole, something to tip the scales. But even so, this man really loved the name Ace, using it in his attacks for his sword, for his son, and it consists of multiple different slashes or thrusts to get through Xebec, while Garp's already strong enough to be unleashing bombs with the punches that he throws, and now he's basically just dropping a Gatling attack at Xebec, a Gatling of nukes, and his attack name is Infinitum Explosion. His attacks have the best names because they sound just as powerful as they are, but their attacks ultimately prove to be enough to defeat Xebec, as we see the sort of evil energy, the goo, evil aura drain out of him. However, it's left ambiguous at the end whether or not he is actually dead. I mean, I'm sure next chapter will showcase him saying his final words as Roger and Garp do the deed themselves, but as of right now, his life is not over yet. We'll get one more chapter of his greatness. But as for his his defeat, I feel like this should confirm that someone who has been Domi reversied can be killed with an overwhelming amount of Conqueror's Haki. So when Luffy and Zoro, and maybe Loki or maybe not since he's still recovering, but Luffy and Zoro at least, when they go back up to the Sun World, they will be huge factors, bigger than they already were when we get back to the present. And speaking of Loki, I don't know where the idea came from that he's been telling all of this, but he isn't. He is only talking about the day 14 years ago and maybe what happened after, but everything from Harald's introduction 109 years ago to now has been courtesy of the narrator. Anyway, I'm assuming the abilities of the Domi Reversi are similar to the Holy Knight's regeneration, so with how Gaban's attacks against Sommer's and Xebec's attacks against Garling here slowed down their healing, if they both continued hammering them with Conqueror's attacks, then they would not have had enough time to regenerate and they would have been fully defeated. But this only covers that one side of overcoming the Domi Reversi, which is killing them. We still have no clue how they are supposed to be flipped back. I'm assuming that's gonna be an issue for Loki to overcome in the present, since he has prior experience after his father Harald also apparently turned 14 years ago, but we'll see. And finally, the narrator comes in again talking about the concealment of this day, how the Rocks pirates shaped this era and how their collapse had just as big an impact as when they were active. It shook the entire world. And remember, during all of this, Wang Ji Ochoku has just been chilling on Hachinosu and making the pirate island his own. It has been 5 chapters since we saw Shaki unveiled as the top prize of the native hunt at the end of chapter 1159, and since all the heavy hitters showed up in chapter 1160, so this was the 6th chapter of the God Valley incident, with next chapter being the 7th and most likely final, making it almost as long as the entirety of Kuma's backstory, which I believe was 8 chapters. So I think in terms of focus and length, the incident was done justice. I think people's biggest issue with the contents will be the lack of fights, which isn't an issue for me personally. Like I said before, during this main fight, I mean, I would have loved to see more fights between some named characters, but not having them doesn't bring my rating down, you know. Now, including chapter 1152, this whole flashback has been 14 chapters long, so next chapter will level it as the longest flashback in the story, I believe, alongside Kozuki Oden's backstory at 15 chapters, and there's still so much to go, so it's gonna comfortably surpass that to become the longest backstory in the entire series. But thinking more short term before we return to Harald and the Giants, we still have that final chapter, the conclusion of this incident, to go.